I was mopping the temple until the dead god woke and said, finally. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The ancient temple of Nethros Prime had seen better days. Its once gleaming obsidian walls now covered in millennia of dust and the residue of forgotten prayers. Cole Bennett pushed his mop across the central chamber floor, whistling an old earth tune his grandfather had taught him, completely unaware that today would be the day everything changed. Cole had been working as a janitor for the Galactic Heritage Preservation Society for 3 years now, cleaning the abandoned temples and monuments scattered across the Outer Rim territories. It was honest work, if lonely, and it paid enough to send credits back home to his sister on Mars. The job posting had promised adventure among the stars, but mostly it involved removing bird droppings from sacred altars and scrubbing graffiti off millennium-old walls. Not exactly the glamorous space exploration he had imagined as a kid. The Temple of Nethros Prime was his latest assignment, a massive structure built by the long-extinct Valerian civilization. According to the briefing materials, the Valorians had worshipped a pantheon of gods, with this particular temple dedicated to Zetharak, their god of entropy and endings. The Valorians had vanished 12,000 years ago, leaving behind only their temples and a handful of untranslatable texts. Most xenoarchaeologists believe they had simply evolved beyond physical form or migrated to another dimension. Cole figured they probably just died out like every other civilization eventually did. He wrung out his mop in the bucket, the murky water sloshing against the sides. The temple was bigger than most he had worked in, with a central chamber that rose nearly 50 meters to a domed ceiling painted with faded astronomical charts. At the far end stood a massive statue of Zetharak, carved from a single piece of black stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The god was depicted as a vaguely humanoid figure with 6 arms, each holding a different symbol of decay: a wilting flower, a crumbling planet, a dying star, an hourglass with no sand, a broken chain, and a skull of some unknown species. Cole had been working his way toward the statue for the past week, methodically cleaning section by section. The floor was made of interlocking tiles, each one carved with tiny prayers in the Valerian script. His translation device had tried to interpret them, but kept spitting out nonsense like, "Honor the silence between heartbeats," and "Praise the spaces between atoms." Typical mystical religious stuff, Cole thought. As he approached the base of the statue, Cole noticed something odd. The stone beneath the statue was different from the rest of the floor. While the temple tiles were a pale gray marble, this section was the same light-absorbing black stone as the statue itself. And unlike every other surface in the temple, it was perfectly clean. Not a speck of dust, not a single scratch or chip despite its obvious age. Cole knelt down, running his hand across the smooth surface. It was warm to the touch, which was strange because the temple's climate control had been offline for centuries, and the ambient temperature was barely above freezing. He pulled out his scanner, a basic model that could detect energy signatures and material composition. The readings made no sense. The scanner showed the black stone as existing in multiple states simultaneously, as if it couldn't decide whether it was solid matter, energy, or something else entirely. Cole tapped the device against his palm, assuming it was malfunctioning. He had dropped it last month while cleaning a temple on Saros 4, and it had been glitchy ever since. He shrugged and stood up, deciding to just mop around the strange black section. As his mop touched the edge where the black stone met the regular marble, something happened. The statue's eyes opened. Cole froze, mop still in hand, staring up at the massive figure. The eyes were the same color as the stone, black on black, but they were definitely open and definitely looking at him. A sound filled the chamber, deep and resonant, like the universe itself was taking a breath after holding it for eons. Then the statue spoke, its voice coming from everywhere and nowhere, vibrating through Cole's bones and teeth. Finally, it said. The mop clattered to the floor. Cole's mouth opened and closed several times before any sound came out. He managed. 12,743 years. The statue continued, its stone lips not moving but the words perfectly clear nonetheless. 12,743 years I have waited for someone to properly clean my temple. Do you have any idea how maddening it is to be a god of entropy while everything around you slowly falls apart, and you cannot even comment on the irony? Cole blinked, then blinked again. His brain was trying very hard to process what was happening and failing spectacularly. "You're not dead," he said stupidly. "Dead?" The statue made a sound that might have been a laugh. "I am Zetharak, the inevitable end, the final silence, the Lord of Entropy. I am the concept of cessation given form and will. How can an ending end? How can silence be silenced? I am as dead as I have always been and as alive as I will always be." Which is to say, your question is meaningless, but I appreciate the sentiment. Cole's hand instinctively went to the emergency beacon on his belt. One press and the Galactic Heritage Preservation Society would send a response team. Probably. Eventually. The Outer Rim territories were not exactly a priority. "I would prefer you did not do that," Zetharak said, somehow reading his intention. "The last time I spoke with representatives of your species' bureaucratic organizations, they tried to classify me as a Class 7 anomaly and contain me in a stasis cube. It was tedious." "You've met humans before?" Cole asked, his hand still hovering near the beacon. "Met? No." "Observed?" "Yes. Your species has only been spacefaring for what, 200 of your years? A blink. Less than a blink. But I have been watching your kind since you first looked up at the stars from your little blue world and wondered what was out there. Curious creatures, humans. So young, so fragile, so temporary. And yet." The statue shifted, black stone moving like water, 6 arms gesturing in a way that should have been threatening, but somehow was not. Zetharak leaned forward, the massive head tilting to examine Cole more closely. "And yet you persist. You adapt. You endure. You look at entropy itself and say not today. It is almost offensive in its defiance of natural law. I find it utterly fascinating." Cole slowly lowered his hand from the beacon. If the god had wanted to kill him, it probably would have done so already. And honestly, after 3 years of scrubbing toilets and mopping floors in abandoned temples, having a conversation with an actual deity was at least interesting. "So," Cole said, trying to keep his voice steady, "you're awake now because I cleaned your floor?" In a manner of speaking. This temple was designed as both a place of worship and a prison. My followers, the Valorians, created it to contain me after they realized that having a god of entropy among them was causing certain problems. What kind of problems? The usual. Accelerated decay of infrastructure, increased rates of cellular degeneration, spontaneous heat death of stars in nearby systems, that sort of thing. My mere presence tends to speed up the inevitable. It is not intentional, but gods are what they are. So they built this temple with specific wards and seals, powered by the prayers and devotion of worshippers. As long as the temple was maintained, as long as the proper rituals were performed, I would remain dormant. Cole looked around at the dusty, abandoned chamber. But there haven't been worshippers here for thousands of years. Precisely. When the Valorians died out, the seals began to weaken. But the architects were clever. They built redundancies into the design. Even without active worship, as long as the temple itself was maintained, as long as it was kept clean and whole, the seals would hold. Dirt and decay are my domain, you see. Every crack in the walls, every layer of dust, every bit of corrosion weakened the prison. And for 12,000 years, this temple has been falling apart, the seals growing thinner and thinner. Until I mopped the floor, Cole said. Until you mopped the floor. In doing so, you reversed enough of the entropy, cleaned enough of the decay, that the seals recognize the action as maintenance, as care, as the continuation of the temple's purpose. And so, per the original binding, I am permitted limited consciousness and communication. Not freedom, not yet, but a reprieve from the absolute silence of containment. Hence, finally, Cole sat down on the floor, not caring that it was still wet. His legs had decided they were done supporting him. "This is insane," he said. "Agreed," Zetharak replied cheerfully. "And yet here we are. You know what I find most amusing about this situation? What? Of all the species in this galaxy, of all the civilizations that have risen and fallen, of all the mighty empires and advanced societies, it is a human janitor armed with a bucket and mop who has accomplished what none could do in 12 millennia. Your species has been spacefaring for barely 2 centuries, and yet you are the ones who actually maintain the old places. You clean them. You preserve them. You show them respect not because you worship what they represent, but because you believe the past matters. Every other species sees these temples as curiosities or resources to exploit. Only humans see them as things to be cared for. Cole thought about his job, about the dozens of temples and monuments he had cleaned over the years. The Galactic Heritage Preservation Society was 97% human staff. Most alien species could not understand why anyone would waste time maintaining the remnants of dead civilizations. We like old things, Cole said. We like to remember, even if we don't always understand what we're remembering. Yes, you are a young species, and so you cling to history like a drowning man clings to driftwood. It gives you context, meaning, a sense that you are part of something larger than yourselves. Other species, older species, they have too much history. They are drowning in it. They want to forget, to move forward, to shed the past like dead skin. But humans? You catalog every scrap, preserve every ruin, maintain every monument. It is perhaps the most hopeful thing about your kind. Hopeful. Cole stood up, grabbing his mop again out of habit. You're a god of entropy. What do you know about hope? Everything, Zethorak said. And for the first time, the god's voice was serious, almost sad. I am the end of all things, Cole Bennett. I see how every story concludes, how every civilization falls, how every star burns out. I am intimately familiar with futility, and that is precisely why I recognize hope when I see it. Hope is not the belief that things will last forever. Hope is the act of caring for something even though you know it will eventually end. Hope is mopping floors in a dead temple because you believe it matters. Hope is defiance in the face of inevitability. Cole stood there, mop in hand, looking up at the god of endings. He had taken this job because it paid well and because he liked the quiet. He had never thought of himself as hopeful. Practical, maybe. Stubborn, definitely. But hopeful? So what happens now, he asked. Now? Now you have a choice. You can leave, file your report with the Galactic Heritage Preservation Society, and they will send teams of scientists to study me. They will poke and prod and eventually try to either bind me more securely or destroy me entirely. It will be boring for me and probably dangerous for them. Entropy is not easily controlled. Or you continue your work. You finish cleaning the temple. You maintain it. And in exchange, I will answer your questions, share my knowledge, and perhaps teach you a few things about the nature of reality that your species has not yet discovered. Think of it as a cultural exchange program between a god and a janitor. Cole considered this. On one hand, the sensible thing to do was to leave immediately and let people who were far more qualified than him deal with a potentially dangerous ancient deity. On the other hand, when would he ever get another chance like this? What kind of things could you teach me, he asked. How to see the spaces between moments. How to hear the sound of stars dying light years away. How to understand that decay is not destruction but transformation. How to read the history of the universe in a grain of sand. The usual god tricks. Will any of that help me mop floors better? Zethorak laughed, a sound like distant thunder. I like you, Cole Bennett. You have your priorities in order. And yes, actually, understanding entropy will make you remarkably efficient at cleaning. You will know exactly where dirt will accumulate, how materials will degrade, and the optimal methods to reverse decay. You will become the best janitor in the galaxy. That's a weird sales pitch. I am a god of entropy offering to teach a human janitor the secrets of the universe so he can clean better. This entire situation is weird. We might as well embrace it. Cole laughed despite himself. This was absolutely insane. He was standing in an ancient alien temple having a casual conversation with a god about the philosophical implications of mopping. His supervisor was going to have a heart attack when he filed this report. If he filed this report, Cole looked at his mop, then at the bucket of dirty water, then up at the massive statue of Zethorak. If I do this, he said slowly, if I keep cleaning and you teach me things, what's the end game? Are you trying to escape? Are you going to use me to break the seals and get free? An excellent question. The answer is complicated. Yes, if you fully restore this temple to its original state, the seals will weaken enough that I could leave if I chose to. But here is the truth that may surprise you. I do not particularly want to escape. Being a god is exhausting. Having worshippers is exhausting. Being responsible for universal concepts is exhausting. This prison has been, in many ways, a relief. No one asking me to accelerate the death of their enemies. No one trying to bargain for immortality. No one building entire civilizations on the foundation of my inevitable triumph over all things. Just silence and stillness and the slow satisfaction of watching the universe run down exactly as it should. Then why wake up at all? Because silence becomes monotonous after 12,000 years. Because even entropy needs stimulation occasionally. Because you are interesting, Cole Bennett, in ways you do not yet understand. And because teaching someone, truly teaching them, is an act of creation. And creation is the opposite of my nature, which makes it deliciously transgressive. Cole thought about this for a long moment. He thought about his sister on Mars, working 2 jobs to support her kids. He thought about his grandfather, who had been a janitor his whole life and had taught Cole that honest work was nothing to be ashamed of. He thought about all the temples he had cleaned, all the history he had preserved without fully understanding why it mattered. Okay, he said finally. I'll do it. But I have conditions. Name them. First, you don't hurt anyone. Not me. Not anyone who comes to this planet. Not anyone in this solar system. If you start causing stars to die, or whatever, the deal is off. My influence is largely passive and only extends a few hundred meters in my current state. But yes, I agree. No intentional harm. Second, everything you teach me, I get to share with other humans if I want. No forbidden knowledge that will drive people insane or whatever. Agreed. Though I should note that some of what I can teach you may be difficult for others to accept. Staring into the face of ultimate entropy tends to cause existential crises. I'll add warnings. Third, you have to explain things in a way I can actually understand. No mystical nonsense or talking in riddles. I shall endeavor to be as clear as cosmic horror allows. And fourth, you have to tell me what actually happened to the Valorians. The real story, not the theories. Zetharak was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost gentle. They transcended, he said. But not in the way most species imagine transcendence. They did not become energy beings or ascend to higher dimensions. They simply realized that existence itself was a choice, and they chose to stop. Not out of despair, but out of completion. They had done everything they wanted to do, learned everything they wanted to learn, and they were ready for the ending. So they asked me, their god of endings, to grant them the most peaceful cessation possible. And I did. They fell asleep as a civilization and simply never woke up. No suffering, no fear, just a gentle slide into non-being. It was, in its own way, beautiful. Cole felt a chill run down his spine. That's actually really sad. Is it? They were happy with their choice. They had no regrets, no unfinished business. How many beings can say they achieved that? Most cling to existence long past meaning, desperate and afraid. The Valorians faced the end with grace and acceptance. I honored them for it. I guess when you put it that way, it's kind of nice. Weird, but nice. Entropy is always weird. You will learn this. Now, shall we begin? You have much floor left to mop, and I have much to teach you. Cole picked up his mop and got back to work. As he cleaned, Zetharak began to speak, his voice a constant presence in the chamber. He spoke of the nature of time, how it was not a river flowing forward, but a dimension like any other, one that humans experience sequentially only because of their limited perspective. He spoke of how every action created ripples of change that spread out through the fabric of reality, each one eventually fading to nothing as entropy claimed them. As Cole mopped, he began to see what Zetharak meant. He could perceive the thin layers of dust settling on surfaces, could predict where water would pool based on microscopic variations in the floor's levelness, could sense the chemical processes of decay happening in the ancient stone. It was not magic exactly. It was more like suddenly having access to data his brain had always been collecting but never processing. You are a quick study, Zetharak observed. Most beings take years to develop this level of sensitivity to entropic processes. I've been cleaning for a long time, Cole replied, wringing out his mop. You develop a feel for it. I'm just seeing things I always kind of knew on some level. Exactly. I am not giving you new abilities. I am simply helping you recognize what was already there. All humans have this potential. You are creatures of pattern recognition and adaptation. You evolved on a planet that was constantly trying to kill you, and you survived by learning to read the signs, to predict what would happen next, to see the threats before they materialized. Entropy is just another pattern. Over the following days, Cole fell into a routine. He would clean during the daylight hours, working his way methodically through the temple. Zetharak had been right about his increased efficiency. Tasks that should have taken hours now took minutes. He could look at a stained wall and instantly know the exact combination of cleaning agents and techniques needed to remove the stain without damaging the underlying material. In the evenings, he would sit at the base of the statue and Zetharak would teach him. They talked about physics and philosophy, about the nature of consciousness and the structure of the universe. Zetharak explained how gods were not supernatural beings, but rather manifestations of fundamental concepts given awareness through belief and worship. He was entropy given form because enough beings had contemplated endings deeply enough to create a psychic impression that became self-aware. "So you're not really a god," Cole said one evening, eating his dinner of rehydrated noodles. "You're more like a conceptual entity. The distinction is largely semantic. I exist. I am aware. I have power. I influence reality. Whether you call that a god or a conceptual entity or a psychic construct matters very little. I am what I am. But you can die, or end, or whatever. Eventually, when the universe reaches its final state, when entropy has claimed everything and there is nothing left to decay, I will cease to exist. My purpose will be fulfilled, and I will simply stop. It will be, I imagine, quite peaceful. You don't sound scared of it. I am the end of all things, Cole. How can I fear my own nature? It would be like you fearing your own breath. Besides, the heat death of the universe is trillions of years away. I have time." Cole twirled noodles on his fork, thinking, what about humans? What happens to us in the end? Your species? The same thing that happens to all species. You will rise, flourish, spread across the stars, and eventually decline and fall. The only question is how long you last and what you accomplish before the end. That's depressing. Is it? You are going to die, Cole Bennett. Probably in 50 or 60 years if you avoid accidents and maintain reasonable health. Does knowing that make your life meaningless? No, Cole admitted. I guess not. Exactly. Meaning is not derived from duration. A flower blooms for a day and is no less beautiful for its brevity. A star burns for billions of years and is no more significant for its longevity. What matters is what you do with the time you have. And humans, I have observed, are remarkably good at making the most of limited time. Cole finished his noodles and stretched. His muscles ached pleasantly from the day's work. The temple was looking better every day. He had cleaned the entire floor now, and the tiles gleamed in the light of the portable lamps he had set up around the chamber. Next, he would start on the walls. "Can I ask you something personal?" Cole said. "You may ask. I may or may not answer. Do you get lonely?" Zetharak was silent for so long that Cole thought he had offended the god. But finally, the statue spoke, and his voice was contemplative. "Yes," he said simply. "Gods are aware of everything within their domain. But awareness is not the same as connection. I perceive all acts of decay, all moments of ending, but I do not experience them as you would. It is like watching a play through thick glass. You see the action but cannot hear the words or feel the emotions. So yes, Cole Bennett, I get lonely. It is one of the few truly painful aspects of existence as a conceptual entity. Is that why you're talking to me? Because you're lonely? Partially, but also because you listen. Most beings, when confronted with the concept of entropy, either despair or deny. They cannot accept that everything ends, and so they refuse to engage with the reality of it. But you mop floors in dead temples. You already understand, on some level, that maintenance is a temporary measure against inevitable decline. And yet you do it anyway. That makes you someone worth talking to. Cole felt something warm in his chest at those words. He had spent most of his life being overlooked, dismissed as just a janitor, just a cleaner, just someone who dealt with other people's messes. But here was a god, an actual god, telling him that he mattered, that his work mattered, that his perspective was valuable. "Thanks," he said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me. For thinking I'm worth teaching." Cole Bennett. You maintain the remnants of civilizations lost to time. You preserve beauty in the face of decay. You are, in your own small way, fighting against my very nature. Of course you are worth teaching. You are the enemy I respect most. Cole laughed. I'm your enemy? All janitors are. Every person who cleans and maintains and repairs is an agent of anti-entropy. You are the resistance against the heat death of the universe, armed with mops and determination. It is wonderful. Over the next few weeks, Cole continued his work. The temple transformed under his care. He cleaned the walls, revealing intricate carvings that had been hidden under millennia of grime. He repaired broken tiles, using techniques Zetharak taught him that involved understanding the molecular structure of the stone and encouraging the crystals to realign themselves. He even managed to get some of the temple's original lighting systems working again, ancient bioluminescent organisms that had been dormant but not dead. As the temple grew cleaner and more whole, Zetharak grew stronger. He could now move his statue body, though he chose not to most of the time. He demonstrated once, walking around the chamber with surprising grace for something made of stone, examining Cole's work with approval. You have a gift for this, Zetharak said, running a stone hand along a wall Cole had just finished cleaning. The Valorians had servants who dedicated their entire lives to maintaining this temple, and they never achieved this level of restoration. I had a good teacher, Cole replied. Plus, I've got better tools than they did. Molecular resequencers are pretty handy for fixing stone. Tools help, but this is more than tools. You care about the work. That makes all the difference. Cole was about to respond when his communicator chimed. He pulled it out, frowning. He had put in for an extension on his assignment, claiming the temple required more work than initially assessed, but he had not expected to hear back from headquarters for another week. The message was short and concerning. Inspection team arriving in 3 days. Significant energy readings detected from your location. Prepare full report on findings. Cole felt his stomach drop. He looked up at Zetharak, who had frozen in place, his black eyes fixed on the communicator. They know, Cole said. Of course they know. I am a god manifesting in real space. My presence generates detectable energy signatures. I am surprised it took them this long to notice. What do we do? We? There is no we, Cole Bennett. You are not responsible for me. You did not know what would happen when you began cleaning. You can simply tell them the truth. You performed your assigned duties and accidentally woke a dormant god. They cannot fault you for that. But they'll take you, study you, lock you up somewhere. Very likely. And you're okay with that? Zetharak tilted his massive head, considering. I have been imprisoned for 12,000 years. A few more in a different prison will make little difference. But I confess, I have enjoyed our conversations. You have reminded me why I found existence interesting in the first place. That is a gift I had not expected. Cole paced back and forth, thinking furiously. 3 days was not much time. He could run, take one of the emergency shuttles, and disappear into the outer rim. But that would make him a fugitive and would not help Zetharak. He could fight, try to defend the temple, but that was stupid. He was one janitor with a mop. They would bring security forces. Or he could do what he did best, clean. How much of the temple still needs work? Cole asked. The upper levels are barely touched. The chambers beneath the main hall have not been opened in millennia. What? Because you said that if the temple was fully restored, the seals would weaken enough that you could leave if you wanted to. Right. Technically correct. But Cole, even working at your enhanced speed, you could not possibly restore the entire temple in 3 days. Not alone, I couldn't. But what if I had help? Cole pulled out his communicator again and scrolled through his contacts. He had worked with a lot of people over the years, other janitors and maintenance workers scattered across the outer rim. People who understood the value of old things, who took pride in their work even when no one else noticed. He started making calls. The first person he called was Maya Foster, a maintenance engineer he had worked with on Taro's station. She picked up on the second ring. Cole, it's been forever. What's up? Maya, I need a favor. A big one. How fast can you get to Nethros Prime? Nethros Prime? That's in the middle of nowhere. Why would I go there? Because there's an ancient temple here that needs cleaning, and if we don't get it done in 3 days, something really important and really incredible is going to be locked away forever. There was a pause. That's the vaguest and most dramatic thing you've ever said to me. I'm in. I can be there in 18 hours. Next, he called Liam Carter, a restoration specialist who worked for a private museum on Kelvin 3. Then Alexis Miles, a xenoarchaeologist who had always been willing to get her hands dirty. Then Derek Vaughn, Connor Wells, and Samantha Blake. One by one, he called in every favor, every friendship, every professional connection he had built over the years. By the time he was done, he had commitments from 14 people, all of them willing to drop everything and travel to a remote temple based on nothing more than his word that it mattered. Zetharak had been listening in silence. When Cole finally put down his communicator, the god spoke, his voice filled with something that might have been awe. "You have assembled a congregation," he said. "I've assembled a cleaning crew," Cole corrected. "There's a difference." "Is there?" "They are coming here because you asked. Because they trust you. Because they believe in the work you do. That is the foundation of every religion," Cole Bennett. "Faith in a person or a purpose greater than yourself. They're coming because they're good people who care about preserving history. Don't read too much into it. I am a god. Reading too much into things is what I do." The first to arrive was Maya Foster, piloting a small cargo ship loaded with industrial cleaning equipment and repair tools. She was a short woman with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and the kind of capable energy that made things happen around her. She took one look at the massive statue of Zetharak and froze. "Cole," she said carefully, "why are the statue's eyes glowing?" "That's Zetharak. He's the god this temple was built for. He woke up when I started cleaning. He's actually really nice once you get past the whole embodiment of entropy thing." Maya stared at Cole, then at Zetharak, then back at Cole. "You know what? I've cleaned stranger things. Where do you need me to start?" By the end of the first day, the entire crew had arrived. Cole gathered them in the main chamber and explained the situation as clearly as he could. He told them about Zetharak, about the seals, about the inspection team coming in 2 days. He told them that if they could restore the temple in time, they could give a god the choice of freedom, which seemed like a better option than having that god locked in a containment facility somewhere. There were questions, obviously. Lots of questions. But when Zetharak spoke, his voice resonating through the chamber with power and dignity, the questions became less important than the work. "I thank you all for coming," Zetharak said. "Know that I do not ask for worship or devotion. I ask only for your labor, freely given. In exchange, I offer my knowledge and my gratitude. Together, we will restore what was lost and prove that endings can be beautiful when they are chosen rather than imposed." Liam Carter, ever the practical one, raised his hand. "Right, so where do we start?" They divided into teams. Maya and Derek took the upper levels, focusing on structural repairs and getting the ancient environmental systems back online. Alexis and Connor began documenting and cleaning the carvings and artwork, preserving them digitally even as they restored them physically. Samantha and the others tackled the lower chambers, areas that had been sealed off and forgotten. Cole moved between teams, coordinating the work and helping wherever he was needed most. Zetharak provided guidance, explaining the temple's layout and the purpose of various chambers. He taught them tricks for working with Valerian materials, showed them how to read the building's energy flows, and occasionally used his power over entropy to reverse particularly severe decay. Working together, they accomplished in hours what would have taken Cole weeks alone. The temple came alive around them, ancient systems humming back to life, bioluminescent lights casting soft glows in chambers that had been dark for millennia. They found libraries of crystalline data storage, workshops filled with tools of forgotten purpose, meditation chambers with acoustics that could make a whisper sound like thunder. In one of the lower chambers, Alexis made a discovery that stopped everyone in their tracks. It was a room filled with thousands of small statues, each one unique, each one carved with incredible detail. They were Valorians, Cole realized, individual portraits of the people who had lived and worshipped here. "This is a memorial," Alexis said softly, running her fingers over the carved face of a Valerian child. "They made statues of themselves before they chose to end. This is everyone who was here for the final ceremony." Zetharak's voice came from behind them, unusually gentle. They wanted to be remembered, not as a civilization or a culture, but as individuals, as people who had lived and loved and chosen their own ending. "I come here sometimes, when I am able, and I remember them. Every single one. The crew worked in reverent silence in that chamber, cleaning each statue with utmost care. It felt like sacred work, like they were honoring the dead in the most fundamental way possible, by ensuring they would not be forgotten. As the second day drew to a close, the temple was transformed. It was not perfect, not yet, but it was whole. The seals that had contained Zetharak for 12,000 years were gossamer thin, held in place more by intention than power. The crew gathered in the main chamber, exhausted but satisfied. They had done it. The temple was restored. Zetharak stood before them, his stone body moving with fluid grace. He seemed more present now, more real, as if the restoration had given him greater purchase on the material world. "You have done something remarkable," he said, "not just in restoring this temple, but in demonstrating the fundamental truth about humanity. You are builders in a universe of decay. You are maintainers in the face of entropy. You see something broken, and your first instinct is to fix it. You see something forgotten, and your first instinct is to remember it. That is your superpower, your species' greatest gift. In a galaxy where most civilizations eventually become too tired to care, you care anyway. So what happens now?" Maya asked. "Can you leave? Are you free?" "I can leave, yes. The seals are weak enough that I could step out of this temple and walk among the stars if I chose. But I have been thinking about what freedom means. I spent 12,000 years contained here, and I was miserable in my silence. But these past weeks, still contained, still bound by seals, I have been more content than I can remember. The difference was not the prison. The difference was having someone to talk to, having purpose beyond my nature, having students to teach." Zetharak turned his massive head toward Cole. "Cole Bennett, you asked me once what my endgame was. I have decided on an answer. I do not want to leave this temple. I want to remain here, but not as a prisoner. I want to make this place into something new. A school, perhaps. A place where beings can come to learn about entropy, about endings, about the acceptance of mortality. I want to teach, and I want this temple to be maintained not out of obligation, but out of choice." "You want to retire and become a teacher?" Cole said, unable to keep the smile out of his voice. "I am a god of endings. What better way to honor that than to help people understand and accept their own endings without fear? And I will need staff, of course. Maintenance workers to keep the temple clean. Administrators to manage students. A director, perhaps, to oversee the whole operation. Someone who understands both the value of preservation and the inevitability of decay." Cole felt everyone's eyes turn toward him. "You want me to run a school for a god of entropy. I want you to run a school where I happen to be the primary instructor. There is a difference. You would have full autonomy, a reasonable salary, and the satisfaction of knowing you are maintaining one of the most historically significant sites in the galaxy. Also, I am told that having Director of Divine Educational Facility on one's resume is quite impressive. That's not even a real job title. It is now." Before Cole could respond, his communicator chimed. The inspection team would be arriving in 6 hours. The crew sprang into action, doing final touches and preparing for the arrival. But Cole pulled Zetharak aside, or as aside as one could pull a 3-meter-tall god. "Are you sure about this?" Cole asked quietly. "You're giving up your chance at freedom. I am choosing a different kind of freedom. Freedom is not the absence of constraints, Cole. It is the ability to choose your constraints. For 12,000 years, I was trapped in silence. Now, I choose to stay in a place that will be filled with voices, with learning, with purpose. That is not imprisonment. That is home." The inspection team arrived exactly on schedule, led by a Vraxian administrator named Kelthros who had the kind of pinched expression that suggested he found the entire outer rim distasteful. With him were 3 xenoarchaeologists, 2 security officers, and someone from the Galactic Council's Department of Anomalous Entities. They stopped short when they entered the temple and saw Zetharak standing in the center of the main chamber, surrounded by Cole's crew and looking very much awake and aware. "This is irregular," Kelthros said, his translator rendering his clicking speech into flat monotone. "We were informed of energy readings, not an active entity." "Good morning to you too," Zetharak said pleasantly. "I am Zetharak, former god of the Valerian people, current entity seeking reclassification from imprisoned deity to independent educational institution. I have prepared documentation for your review. One of Zetharak's stone hands gestured, and a holographic display materialized in the air, showing detailed plans for the temple's conversion into a school. Curriculum outlines, safety protocols, enrollment projections, even a budget. Kelfros stared at the display. You want to run a school? I want to teach. The school is simply the structure that makes that possible. I have already secured my first staff member, Cole Bennett, who will serve as director. The temple has been fully restored to historical preservation standards, as you can verify. I am requesting formal recognition as an educational entity under Galactic Council Charter Section 47, which allows for non-traditional institutions if they meet safety and educational value requirements. The woman from the Department of Anomalous Entities stepped forward. She was human, Cole noted with some relief, a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. Her name tag read Dr. Eliza Cooper. You've really thought this through, she said, scrolling through the holographic documents. I have had 12,000 years to think. I am very good at it. Dr. Cooper looked at Cole. And you're willing to run this place? Work with an entity that literally embodies entropy. I've been working with him for weeks now, Cole said. He's a better teacher than most of my professors were. And he's right. This place should be a school. The Valorians built it as a place of contemplation and learning. Seems fitting to continue that tradition. The inspection took hours. The team examined every corner of the temple, tested the structural integrity, interviewed each member of the cleaning crew about their experiences with Zetharak. The security officers tried very hard to find something threatening about the god, but Zetharak was on his best behavior, answering every question with patience and occasional flashes of dry humor. Finally, as the sun was setting on Nethros Prime, Kelfros assembled his team and conferred in hushed tones. Cole stood with his crew, anxiously waiting for the verdict. Dr. Cooper broke away from the group and approached Cole privately. You know this is insane, right? She said quietly. I'm starting to get that impression, yeah. A god of entropy running a school, a janitor as director, a crew of maintenance workers as founding staff. It sounds like the setup for a bad joke. But, she smiled, but it's also the most genuinely interesting proposal I've seen in 20 years of dealing with anomalous entities. Most of them either want to conquer something or hide from everything. This one wants to teach philosophy and accept mortality. It's refreshingly mundane in its strangeness. So you'll approve it? I'll recommend approval. The final decision will be up to the council, but between you and me, they're going to say yes. Mostly because no one wants the headache of trying to contain a god who doesn't want to be contained. Easier to let him teach classes on existentialism to graduate students. The official approval came through 2 weeks later. The temple was reclassified as the Nethros Institute for Entropic Studies, with Zetharak as the primary instructor and Cole Bennett as the director. The crew that had helped restore the temple were all offered positions if they wanted them. Most accepted. The first semester started small, just a dozen students, mostly xenophilosophers and theoretical physicists who wanted to understand entropy from a unique perspective. But word spread quickly about the god who taught classes on acceptance and endings, and enrollment grew. Cole found himself busier than he had ever been as a simple janitor. He managed budgets and schedules, coordinated with the Galactic Council on accreditation, hired additional staff, and yes, still cleaned floors when needed. The temple had to be maintained, after all, but it was good work, meaningful work. Every day, he saw students having the same revelations he had had, learning to see patterns in decay, understanding that endings were not inherently bad, but simply inevitable. Zetharak turned out to be a remarkable teacher, patient and insightful, able to explain complex concepts in ways that made them accessible without being condescending. On quiet evenings, after the students had gone to their dormitories and the staff had finished their duties, Cole would sit in the main chamber with Zetharak, and they would talk. Sometimes about philosophy, sometimes about the running of the school, sometimes about nothing in particular. Do you ever regret it? Cole asked one evening. Choosing to stay here instead of being free. Zetharak considered the question with his usual thoughtfulness. Every choice involves sacrifice. In choosing to stay, I sacrificed the possibility of wandering the stars. But in wandering the stars, I would have sacrificed this. Purpose, connection, meaning. I do not regret my choice. Do you regret yours? Cole looked around the temple, at the clean floors and glowing walls, at the students' projects scattered around the chamber, at the life that filled a place that had been dead for 12,000 years. Not even a little bit, he said. Years passed. The Nethros Institute became one of the most respected schools in the galaxy for existential philosophy and entropic studies. Students came from hundreds of worlds to study with Zetharak and his growing faculty. The temple expanded, new wings added to accommodate more students and more diverse programs. Cole's sister visited once, bringing her kids. They were terrified of Zetharak at first, but the god won them over by teaching them how to see the patterns in falling leaves and by explaining that being scared of endings was natural but not necessary. Your brother has built something remarkable here, Zetharak told her. My brother was always remarkable, she replied. The universe just took a while to notice. On the 10th anniversary of the temple's restoration, the Galactic Council held a ceremony at the Institute. They presented Cole with an award for cultural preservation and Zetharak with a formal recognition as an educator. Kelthros himself, the Vraxian administrator who had been so skeptical at first, gave a speech praising the Institute's contributions to galactic understanding of mortality and meaning. During the reception, Dr. Cooper found Cole standing on one of the temple's balconies, looking out at the sunset. Quite a journey from mopping floors, she said. I still mop floors, Cole replied with a grin. I just have help now. You know what I think is the most remarkable thing about all this? What? You never stopped being a janitor. You just became a janitor with a bigger building to maintain. And somehow, that was exactly what the universe needed. Cole laughed. Is there a philosophical lesson in that? Probably. Something about how maintaining things is holy work, or how the small acts of care are the only things standing between civilization and chaos. You should ask Zetharak. He's the expert on that stuff. That night, after the celebration had ended and the guests had departed, Cole did his usual evening rounds, checking that doors were locked and lights were dimmed. He found Zetharak in the memorial chamber, standing among the thousands of Valerian statues. Do you think they would approve? The god asked quietly. The Valorians. Do you think they would be happy with what their temple has become? I think they chose their ending, Cole said. And part of that choice was trusting you to carry on without them. You're honoring their memory by teaching others to face endings with the same grace they did. Yeah, I think they'd approve. Zetharak reached out one massive stone hand and gently touched the statue of a Valerian child, the same one Alexis had found years ago. Thank you, Cole Bennett, for mopping my floors, for waking me, for giving me purpose beyond my nature. You saved me in ways you do not fully understand. You saved me too, Cole replied. I was just a janitor going through the motions. You showed me that maintenance is sacred, that cleaning is an act of hope, that preserving the past gives meaning to the future. So I guess we saved each other. A fitting ending for a story about entropy. Everything balances out in the end. Is this the end? Ends are my specialty, Cole. This is not an ending. This is a transformation, an evolution. The temple ended, and the school began. Your old life ended, and this new one began. The Valorians ended, and their legacy continues through us. Entropy is not destruction. It is change, and change is the only constant in the universe. Cole smiled. You should put that in a lecture. I already did. Twice. The students loved it. They stood together in comfortable silence, a human janitor and a god of endings, surrounded by the memories of a civilization long gone and the promise of students yet to come. The temple had been dead for 12,000 years. Then someone had mopped the floors, and everything had changed. Sometimes, Cole reflected, the most important work is the simplest. Sometimes, all it takes to wake a god is a clean floor and a willingness to listen. Sometimes, the end of one story is just the beginning of another. And sometimes, just sometimes, the galaxy is saved by someone with a mop and a bucket and the stubborn human belief that things worth saving are worth the effort to maintain them. The temple's lights dimmed as the evening cycle began. Tomorrow would bring new students, new lessons, new challenges. But tonight, there was just this moment of peace, this quiet satisfaction of a job well done and a purpose fulfilled. Cole picked up his mop from where he had left it by the door. There was a spill in the east corridor that needed attention. Some things never changed, and that was just fine by him. As he walked away, Zetharak called after him. Cole. Yeah. Finally. Cole laughed. Yeah. Finally. And in a temple that had been silent for 12 millennia, there was the sound of a mop against clean floors, the soft glow of ancient lights, and the voice of a god telling a student about the beauty of endings chosen rather than feared. It was the sound of life continuing, of purpose renewed, of entropy itself being held at bay by nothing more than soap, water, and the very human refusal to let things fall apart without a fight. The temple stood, maintained and alive, a monument not to what had ended but to what endured. And at its heart was a janitor who had stumbled into greatness simply by doing his job well, and a god who had found freedom in choosing to stay. Some stories end. Some stories transform. And some stories, the best ones, keep going as long as there are people willing to maintain them. This was one of those stories. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.